From the Center for Investigative Reporting and PRX, this is Reveal. I'm Al Letson. Today, we've been investigating the larger political forces around President Trump's immigration policy. Before the break, we heard how the Guatemalan president, Jimmy Morales, sent tanks to surround the headquarters of CICIG, the UN-backed anti-corruption commission. Veteran journalist Maria Martin was there in September of 2019, a few days before CICIG finally closed its doors for good.
To get to the CICIG's headquarters, I have to walk past a concrete wall and through a metal gate with guards. The mood is somber, as if somebody had died.
Ahí, esa es la silla del comisionado Iván Velázquez.
CICIG spokesman Matias Ponce points out the chair where Iván Velázquez used to sit.
Sobre esta mesa,
Tapping the furniture as if to bring back the past, Ponce tells me about the 120 corruption cases that were investigated on this exact table.
se decidieron 120 casos que se presentaron en estos 12 años de historia sobre esta mesa.
We continue our conversation in English.
Some people say that this decision to get rid of the CICIG by the Morales government will take Guatemala back decades of effort. Decades.
Decades of effort because we were able to show to the people that the law is important to make a better country, independently of your economic and political power. All of society should respect the law.
Ponce says CICIG's building is expected to be demolished. And just like that, the UN anti-corruption force that took on 2 presidents and represented a beacon of hope for an entire generation of Guatemalans is no more. Without it, says Ponce, many Guatemalans are afraid. That brings us back to Zoila and her family, who we met earlier in the show. I've made so many trips to Zoila's small village. It's in a mountainous province near Guatemala's border with Mexico that sends more people to the United States than anywhere else in Central America. During the Civil War in the 1980s, Todos Santos was a center of bloodshed. For generations, these indigenous communities have been marginalized. Systemic discrimination has denied them access to education and health care, while investment has passed them by. And even today, there's little evidence of Guatemalan government support here or of that U.S. aid money that Joe Biden was talking about. The main economy here isn't factories or coffee. It's money sent home from abroad, from family members who have gone north. Everywhere you look, there are spacious, multi-story American-style suburban homes. But for those who don't have relatives abroad, there's little for them here. I drive past Todos Santos and towards Zoila's village. We climb up higher into the mountains on a narrow, winding road. In some parts of this region, people raise sheep, but here it's quiet. The houses get smaller, and the roads turn to dirt. When we heard from Zoila earlier, she was telling us the story of how her husband Gilberto and their son Franklin had been separated by the U.S. Border Patrol. Gilberto tells me what happened next.
Allí me entregué con la migración. Me llevaron a Flores, Arizona.
After they were separated, Gilberto was taken to a jail in Florence, Arizona. He didn't know what happened to Franklin.
¿Y dónde está Franklin? Mi hijo, ¿dónde está? No sé dónde está Franklin. ¿Dónde está a Franklin?
This was Gilberto's second trip to the U.S. He'd also come north in the early 2000s. He worked in construction, building suburban tract homes outside San Diego. But he was deported after a traffic stop. This time, sitting in the detention center in Arizona, he's given a choice. incarceration or deportation.
Sí, ya mero me morí en la cárcel por tristeza por Franklin. Yo pensé que ya nunca voy
Gilberto
a salir
says
ahí.
that in his cold cell, he couldn't take the sadness. He thought he was going to die, and he had no idea where Franklin was. So Gilberto made a difficult decision. He signed his deportation papers,
Mejor que firmé mi deportación.
leaving Franklin in the United States.
Tonight,
What are you doing?
outrage across the country.
Do you agree that we need to take care of those children?
This was at the height of President Trump's family separation policy. His administration was separating thousands of children from their parents at the border and incarcerating them in gyms, warehouses, and even cages. As for Zoila, she tells me through a mom to Spanish translator about those dark days in 2018 when she didn't know what had happened to her husband or to her son.
Dice la señora que cuando el niño fue separado con ese trauma, ella de una vez se enfermó. Por la tristeza por Franklin, se quedó con el dolor de los pies. Dice que no puede caminar. Y no tiene...
Zoila said it was so hard when Franklin was gone that she started to get physically ill. I thought he was dead, and I was sick from the sadness. My whole body ached, she tells me. Zoila fell apart, outraged that her husband had gone to the U.S. and returned without her son. She thought she would never see Franklin again. Zoila fell into a deep depression. Most days, she didn't even get out of bed. She knew she needed help, but couldn't afford to go to the doctor. And as for Gilberto, he had traveled 2,000 miles twice. He wanted to be able to send money home so that one day he could build one of those glorious suburban-style homes for his wife and children. But he'd been deported twice, and now his family was accusing him of abandoning Franklin. Finally, Gilberto finds a lawyer in town, and with his help, they're able to track Franklin down.
¿Dónde está a Franklin? Franklin está en Nueva York.
Where is Franklin? He was in New York, imprisoned in a federal detention center for children separated from their parents. When they finally reach him on the phone, it's heart-wrenching.
Cuando hablo con él, Franklin, pues él estaba llorando. ¿Y por qué me dejaste? Pues ¿dónde está mi papá?
Why did you leave me here? Franklin asked. I didn't know where you were. When am I going to go back?
Me siento triste. ¿Cuándo voy a regresar?
Gilberto didn't know what to answer. From his small village, even making a phone call was difficult. But finally, with the lawyer's help, 6 months after they were separated, Gilberto gets some good news. He's told to go to Guatemala City, that Franklin will be waiting for him there. Franklin was reunited with his parents on October 28, 2018. Around the same time, the head of CICIG, Ivan Velázquez, was kicked out of the country. Franklin was still struggling to readjust to life in the village. I visited them the following September, while CICIG was closing its doors for good. Franklin and I sit together, opening bottles of Coke right at the bottom of the hill not far from their house. His mother, Zoila, brings out a meal of boiled eggs and black beans. I try to make conversation with Franklin about what the shelter was like in the U.S., but he's withdrawn. The first time I saw him, he shrank against the wall. His father, Gilberto, says that Franklin came back a different little boy. He used to be talkative. And even now, a year after he came back home, when I ask him about his time in detention, it's hard for him to say more than a simple yes or no. The only time he lights up is to say he liked the food he got there.
¿Qué comías ahí?
cornflakes, Doris.
I like the cornflakes and donuts at the shelter, he says. Uh-huh. The family is happy to be back together. But at the same time, Zoila and Gilberto don't have enough money to feed their 3 children 1 meal a day, every day. So for all the heartache, Gilberto says he didn't see any other choice when he took Franklin to the U.S.
¿Por qué me fui? Por pobreza y para mantener la familia.
Why did I go, he says? Por pobreza, because of poverty. He was making a decision to support his family. And in these western highlands of Guatemala, Gilberto's story is one shared by many.
Yo trabajo de agricultor todos los días. Cuando no hay, voy a traer leña.
The only job Gilberto can find is picking potatoes or gathering wood. Gilberto makes $6 a day, but often can only find work 2 or 3 days a week.
Tengo un trabajo así seguido, nada.
Gilberto says even though the family is back together, they are poorer than before.
Me costó casi 30,000 quetzales.
To get to the States, Gilberto borrowed close to $6,000 from a bank to hire a coyote to get them across the border. He still owes the bank that money.
Yo debo el dinero ahorita. Ese es el problema. No hay nada, no tengo nada. No tengo. Entonces, no es tan fácil. Todavía está con la deuda.
He wants to pay off the debt, but he only makes $6 a day. So he can't even pay the interest on his loans. Today, the U.S. border with Mexico is closed. And with coronavirus, in Guatemala, people are also sheltering in place. Meanwhile, deportation flights sending migrants back from the U.S. continue, hundreds of them since March. In late April, the Guatemalan government said that 20% of all COVID cases in Guatemala were coming from people deported by the U.S. One U.S. congresswoman accused Trump of exporting death. Aló? I've been checking in on Zoila, Gilberto, and Franklin since then.
¿Aló?
Aló, ¿con quién hablo?
Yo soy Franklin.
Franklin, ¿cómo estás?
Bien.
When I called this month, Franklin had come out of his shell enough to tell me that with the lockdown, they aren't allowed to leave their village. And because of the coronavirus, there's even less work than before.
No hay dinero.
No hay dinero.
Sí.
There's no money, he tells me. There's no food, and there's no firewood. Que Dios los cuide, okay? Okay.
Gracias a usted, María.
Adios. Goodbye.
Bye. Thank you.
Franklin's father, Gilberto, still fantasizes about going back north. But there's no way he could secure another loan for a third trip to the U.S.
Cuando Franklin quiere regresar otra vez, pues, cuando ya tenía sus 18 años.
He tells me that he's waiting for Franklin, who's now 10, to reach his 18th birthday.
Pues, cuando va a ser el más grande. Pues es lo que yo quiero, sí.
Then his son Franklin can try his luck going north alone.
Since CICIG was kicked out of the country, we've seen a return to the way things used to be. Guatemala's new president, Alejandro Giammattei, has deep ties to drug mafias and former military officials. He used to oversee the prison system, and CICIG came after him for illegally killing prisoners. Since he took office, 12 human rights defenders have been killed in Guatemala, and others have had to flee the country. Thanks to reporter Maria Martin. Her book, Crossing Borders, Building Bridges, A Journalist's Heart in Latin America, is out this month. Our lead producer this week is Anayansi Diaz-Cortez. Aaron Glantz edited the show with help from executive producer Kevin Sullivan. Thanks to Professor Jo Marie Burt of George Mason University, Felix Perez Mendoza,